Hey guys, it's Amber Rose again here at the Prospect Group at Masses Holdings, and today we're having conversations with my favorite partners that we've done deals with over the course of the year. And today I have Sabrina here with Fidelity Title. She's an incredible individual, a incredibly hard worker, and the reason why I invited her here today is because recently we had a very difficult, messy transaction, and she came to the rescue. I just picked up the phone and she came in there and totally solved all the problems. So I wanted to bring her in today and have a quick conversation and about how how amazing you are and how great and thankful we are working with you this year. One of the things that I think is really interesting, I have, at the end of every year, I like to reflect back on, what we did in 2021 and what wins we had, what losses. And there's always that one deal that's super messy, very stressful. And when you're in the moment of the deal, you feel like it's never going to work because it's just every day is a phone call or an email of like, this went wrong and can you believe this happened? And one of the deals, we won't mention the name to protect the innocent and non-innocent, but we recently had a transaction that could have gone wrong many ways, and it was a very complicated title situation, and I just want to have the conversation about that, about how important it is to work with somebody like you, who I can just pick up the phone, I can text you, hey, emergency Sabrina, I need you to like push this through for us or whatever. Can you talk about that a little bit, about like your how you're able to do this because of maybe your history? You have a history of this, right?
I have a history. I've been doing this for almost 16 years.
Okay.
I think communication, though, throughout the transaction was key, that we kept communicating, touching base, checking in, so that I could follow up with my team and make sure that they were on the page and we were on page with escrow, so that we were always on track of the transaction from our end.
Mm-hmm.
So even though other things aside kept popping in and kind of disrupting things a little, that we were in communication, we were on top of it, one step ahead and ready to move with these changes that kept presenting themselves.
So Sabrina, can you explain maybe like in lay English to the general public, like what does title do and what role do they have in the transaction? Because it's a pretty crucial role in every transaction that we do.
So title, I am a rep, I have a title officer, and we have a huge team behind us. What title does is they help record the transaction, but we make sure all the liens are paid off and the new loan is put on correctly. That title is clear to the owner of the property, then no one can come in and say, I am now owner of this property, because we go by what title is said, by what is recorded by the county recorder's office. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes and step behind the scenes to get this moving. But it's pretty seamless because this is what we do day in, day out. Then there's always these other elements besides, the transaction that has to, we have to work with those elements. But our job is to make sure that we clear off any liens, make sure title is clear and the ownership that it needs to be in, and that we're providing clear title. That is our responsibility. It's a one-time fee. It's not like a premium that you pay yearly. You're paying it at one time at the time that you buy the property or refinance it. And if there is a defect in title, it's our responsibility as the insurance company to correct it.
So let's say hypothetically I have a seller and the seller refuses to pay title. For some reason he just says, I don't want to pay title. What could happen to the seller if they don't pay the title insurance?
That's a good question. Is there a loan?
Yeah, there's a loan.
The lender is going to require it. So the lender is going to get you're going to get a standalone policy, because the lender won't close without them being insured on their side of the transaction. It is possible for people to get to want to close their transaction without title insurance. Very rare. I don't really ever see it. But the lender is not going to accept it. I highly advise against it. I think it's a very important protection, because also it's our job to show what is on title, meaning what liens, and I can't imagine how escrow can work without us working side by side with them to show them, are there any unpaid property taxes, are there any unpaid liens, mortgage, anything outstanding, who to clear off the previous title owners. Let's say somebody passed away, and then we have to make sure that ownership, whoever now inherited the property, is the right person to be able to sign off. So, in short, we work side by side with escrow and with the agents and with the lender to coordinate the entire transaction.
Okay.
But the lender will not give the loan without title insurance, so they would, instead of getting an owner's policy and a lender's policy, they would get a standalone policy, which will be more expensive. If an investor buys a property cash, they don't have to pay a lender's fee, because our loan policy amount goes based on the loan amount. So if there's no loan amount, there's no lender's policy. But there is still an owner's policy, and interestingly enough, the buyer inherits the policy, but the seller pays that. So, the buyer
Wait, say that again?
there is an owner's policy, which the seller pays, that the buyer inherits.
Right.
And so if one decides they don't want to pay for that owner's policy, a lot of times the buyer will say, I will pay for that, or the seller, I don't feel safe going into this. So
because there's just so many things that can go wrong if you don't. It's kind of like,
how do you know who is the owner if you don't check title? How do you know if there are any unpaid taxes if you don't check the title? What we do is we provide a preliminary report that shows the liens that we find, and we do a date down based on what is recorded with the county.
mm-hmm. And just to like break it down for like what we do, like when I'm talking to a seller on the phone, if I'm buying direct from them, I don't remove all contingencies until I look at the preliminary title report to make sure that this seller is in fact who they say they are. Because I get a lot of fraud in Los Angeles where people claim they inherited this property, they did a quick claim deed, they did all this weird stuff, and they own it. And then I talk to title, and you'll send me a prelim, and I'm like, we look at it together, and you're like, this guy's definitely not the owner. He's trying to pull a fast one. I think that's a big part of what you guys do.
That's a big part, especially when they're held in LLCs, trusts, corporations. We need to see the managing members and documentation. We need to check out that chain of title. But even just to make sure the person that says that they can sell off on the property, how do you know without checking with title to say, what does title say, and can title verify that?
Is title kind of similar, like the role that you guys play in the transaction, would it be similar to like if I were to go to New Jersey or New York and do a deal?
Completely different.
Where they use attorneys for what you do, and then in California we use title.
Right.
Is that right?
We do title and escrow. New Jersey, New York, they do table closings with attorneys. So they don't use escrow companies. We have title and escrow. So they're still using title out there, but they're not using escrow. They're closing with attorneys. So it's an attorney state rather than an escrow state.
Interesting.
And in Southern California, we have independent escrows, which are very popular here. In like Northern California, everything is done with title and escrow combined by the title company.
Got it.
So every place varies considerably. Even the county recorder's office and their requirements are unique to their situation, to their location.
Yeah. So just to continue the conversation, what you do in title is very helpful to us as investors, as value add investors, because I can meet a seller and I can call you up, and in the same day or the next you can get me a preliminary title report, and I can quickly see who the real owner is, so I'm not wasting a bunch of time. Because I see a lot of transactions where the agents or the investors don't pull title early on, and they go through all these tedious steps and they get to the finish line and then they pull title, and then they're like, oh, by the way, that's not even the right owner. You can't even close the transaction. So I would say in another way, like you help save a lot of time in the process if it's done early on.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Especially if somebody inherited the property, that needs to make sure they have the right documentation it can be in the family, but do they have a trust to say that they are the new owner of the property?
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the idea of fraud and elder abuse, which is something that we are now looking into, that has become an issue. It could be a society thing. It could be that people are relying a lot on their caretakers, and the caretakers are now recording a deed, or kind of having the people that they're watching over sign over a deed to them to inherit the property. But I don't know if that was their full intention when they were of right mind. So we have to check the signatures that their signatures are the same as what they were previously, because some people are not in the capacity to sign anymore. They're not in the right state of mind. So we have to be careful, because that can be a claim against the parties involved in transaction, and us saying all of a sudden the kids come, the heirs saying, how did you sell this property? I had the right to that property. You didn't have any right to sell off this property. Who gave you the right? And we had to look back and see that chain of title to say what happened, and if this, I mean, I've had some people that were mad at me because they were like, you know, you have to get a doctor's letter and this and that, but we just have to do the due diligence to make sure that we are making sure that we're trying to be as cautious as possible for the consumer. It's a very scary trend, I think, that we're seeing, is that with kids, you know, out of state and or just caretakers that are you know, in charge of people, I think it's more as people age and are getting older and are living longer, that there's just more caution that people have to do. And one thing I was even talking to a client about is how serious it is to put a property into a trust or into a will, to make sure you have that, and so that the parties have that, because they can say, I had the right to sell the house, but was it still in your mother's name as her property, as her sole and separate, or was she married? We need to produce original death certificate documents. Very, very important to make sure that you are protecting yourself and your family, because there's a lot of money in these properties right now, and a lot of heart and soul. People worked really hard to build this, and a lot can go wrong. So people really need to be cautious that the people that are watching their parents are trustworthy, but also that you are holding on to the right documentations, and that you are monitoring that, and that you, if you can see that your, you know, elder parents are not in the right mind, that you're taking over the power of attorney, so they don't even have that, so that's not even an option.
Okay, so Sabrina, that's so interesting. I had no idea. Can you kind of go into detail of, like, so people that are watching this can understand how they can protect themselves and their family members from having something like that happen?
Sure, and I, you know, I am representing title, not the legal aspect of this. Having said that, I think it's very important for the family to meet and have this conversation, or at least to make sure that there is protection for the family and the family's legacy, so that trust documents, wills are not recorded. You need to have a copy of it. So it's very important to put it in a safe place, to make copies of it, to actually ask your parents where they are. Because if you don't have that, it's as if you don't have it and you have to go through probate. So the point is, let's try and get this stuff when your parents are of sound mind, and they are at the ability to give you, to do a documentation, and have the conversation, even if they may not want to have it, because it means that we're all getting older, is that we're protected and that you're securing the legacy of how hard they worked to build this house. So keep the documents, ask about those documents, find those documents, see how things are held, ask those questions. Find out, have these conversations as a family. And if your parents are aging, make sure that you have, or somebody is appointed to have that power of attorney. And sometimes you have like somebody outside of the family, but make sure they're trusted as well, that they're not gonna do anything, and that they'll be around, and that you also have a backup documentation. Because anything can happen to anybody at any point, and it's your responsibility to have the proper paperwork to provide to the title company, especially when they're not recorded, because that means it's not public record. So we need the originals.
So one of the things, when I first met you, I asked you how you got into title, and I remember that was a really interesting story. Can you just kind of share on that?
Absolutely. I tried to avoid getting into real estate at all costs. because my dad or my parents were in real estate, and I was like, I don't understand what you do. Like, what are you doing? Why are you here? What are you? In any case, so I tried to stay in college for as long as humanly possible. I did internships. My dad was like, take a real estate course, take a tax course, learn the business. He was older, he had heart disease, and I'm so fortunate that he kind of guided me in this direction, because I talk a lot about legacy, and I really believe that that is like a big part of my soul now. So I had I got my real estate license, and I got a opportunity to work in an office while trying to study for my license, and they needed an escrow assistant, so I was an escrow assistant. And then they this is back in the day. This isn't like 2006 when there was a whole other market change. They bought out another office, so I became an escrow rep, and then I became a title rep, and I've been a title rep ever since. And I've loved it, and I love being around people, and I love learning about the business, and I love learning about behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, and trying to create my own legacy now and maintain that legacy. But I really believe strongly in investing in real estate.
So for you, what do you think is the most fascinating thing about title and what you do on our transactions?
For me, I think that it's because I get to be out in the field with people, that I get to be able to help people of all kinds, that I am able to connect. I am able to connect people and topics and ideas and educate myself, go to conferences. So it's multifaceted for me. But I want to learn as much as I can, so when people call me and ask questions, I can help them, or at least direct them to the right people to go to.
Awesome. And that's like, just to let that, whoever's watching know, like that's one of the things that I think is very rare that you do, is like, I love how when we open up escrow on deals, if we can't close on it, you can help us find capital partners or other partners to help make sure that we can do what the seller wants us to do. And that's a big deal.
I think that's so interesting, because I think that sometimes you just think that they're just agents and lenders, but there's so many different niches in it, especially seeing the commercial side, and then you realize in residential there are different people that specialize in different things in different areas, and so being able to connect the two can kind of be like the magic of it. It's like there are different kinds of lenders that specialize in different things, there are different agents that specialize in different things. And my job is not only to help close the transaction, make sure that it closes on time and that I'm communicating when needed, but that I can also help bring the people together to make those deals come to the point where they can close.
So one of the things, like when we first started working together, I found it really interesting how, so we had a very complicated development deal, and at that time I didn't do a bunch of development deals. And I remember we opened up escrow, I showed it to you, and then you put me in touch with people that were professionals in that industry that might want it if it wasn't for us. And it turns out it was on a hillside and it wasn't for us. So you were able to, even though all your job is just title, because of all your connections, you were able to connect us to other people in the industry, other investors who could step in my place and close on this transaction to help out the seller. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing for us is to be of service and to help the seller. Like, that's really our mission. And sometimes I can't do that, but the seller wants to work with us. And that's, I think, the beauty of what you do I'm gonna say you guys are unconventional title rep, title officer,
rep, yeah.
Title rep, in that you don't just look at, this is my little job, I'm just doing title, but you're like, okay, so Amber can't help out the seller, who else do I know in my Rolodex that can help make this happen? And the interesting thing about that transaction is you introduced me to your community and your people, and I was actually enlightened of like, oh, if it's on a hillside, are the streets wide? And there was all these intricate details in that deal that I didn't know, that I learned because the people, your contacts, were like, oh, this person can't buy it.
Certain things. It's going to be extra tricky because of the way that the land is situated.
Yeah. And like one of your investors told me, oh, the streets are too narrow, they can't get trucks in there to do the development. It's on a hillside that's very advanced. If you don't have views of downtown LA, it's not going to be worth the same amount of money. And like going into that deal, I had no idea. All we knew was we have a seller who really needs to sell. They don't want to list it on the open market. How do we help them? And I think that's the interesting thing about what you do and our relationship, is that we're able to service a seller who doesn't want to do things conventionally. Because sometimes these sellers, they don't want to be public. They don't want people knowing their business. They want to close the transaction, and however we can do it for them so that they can have privacy and peace of mind. And I think that's one of the most interesting things that you and I have done together that most people don't know. Most people, in title, you just think, oh, it's just title. But there's, like you said, there's so many more layers to this, and it can become, I think it's like an art form, what we do, believe it, because some people look at it as it's just like, brick and mortar and wood. But I really do believe that, like, if you look at it creatively in different dimensions, it is an art form. Every deal is a piece of art, right? Because it
totally. You have to mold it or see how it molds and try and make it work based on what you have to work with.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a talent. I mean, luckily for us, we're in a business where there's money and there's people, and it's very exciting, but it's also very hard and very tricky. So you always have to, help, be extra creative for the transaction.
Yeah.
Especially in the line that we're in, that we're trying to, not just put a property on the market, but figure out the best way to put that property on the market.
Right.
And who to present it to, because we're not putting it on the market. We don't want it to sit, we want it to move.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think one of the things that you and I have done together that's great is, like, we pay a lot of money for leads, and sometimes these seller leads, they want a certain price that is very close to retail. So I can't come in as a value add investor and make that deal work, but I can come to you and say, hey, do you know any really, really experienced agents that can help us list it on the open market to get them what they need? And that's happened multiple times, and that's a beautiful thing,
I think it's just having the conversation. I like to talk to people.
Yeah.
I think that's the fun. I love this business, but I also love talking to people, and you find that since we've all kind of are growing up in this business and been in the business for a very long time, that we have our strengths. And you develop a niche depending on what you do. And if somebody has such a strong niche, it's a perfect fit for other people, and there's a way for all of us to work together. There's a lot of agents and there's a lot of lenders, but still, the magic is working together.
The magic is working together, absolutely. Yeah. So we had that very I had a very, very tricky, complicated development deal, and I didn't have any solution, really. I was just like, I know this is a deal, we need to figure this out. And you called me up and you're like, hey, why don't you come to this open house in Encino, and I'm going to introduce you to a couple investors that I think this deal might work for them. And I remember coming to that open house. First of all, it was amazing.
It was so fun.
I wasn't even expecting that. It was ridiculous. Coming from the office, and everyone's wearing like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, it was like diamonds.
I went shopping for jewelry after that. Oh
yeah,
Swarovski.
I know, exactly. It was crazy, but it was so interesting because for me it was a very different experience because I came with you. You had relationships with all the developers and all the real estate agents, and I got these warm introductions of like, hey, I went to meet Amber from the prospect group. She has this deal you might be interested in, and so it was really interesting because we were able to build credibility very quickly. And we were able to put different deals together because of it. And I think that's something that's really unique that you and I have that is just, and it's fun.
I think that talking about magic, that was the magic that you actually showed up like, busy day, long day, you had shoes in the car and you were able to come. I mean, it's a long, long day after work to have to now go to Encino to come to this.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you did, because sometimes there's nothing replaceable to face-to-face introductions and interactions. It makes us all stronger and value add. There's a lot to say about, technology, but nothing's going to replace personal interaction, especially in our business. And so being able, I love to just meet people, but add you know, you have so much value
Mm-hmm.
that you represent for your clients that it's actually so easy for me just to make that introduction.
Yeah. That was awesome, though. I'll never forget that.
It was so great.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, we're famous. I was waiting to see like the Selling Sunset stars to be like, Trishelle, what's going on in season 2? Yeah. But it was so cool. But it was interesting because like I've been to those kind of events before without an introduction, and it's a very different experience. And you just go, you look, you have your hors d'oeuvres, you have a cigar, and that's it. But I think having somebody like you who has those relationships from years and years and years and wanting to do business, like it was such a beautiful thing to be like, oh, you know, it was so fun to like partner up. And I know there's going to be a lot more deals that happen as a result of that. It's like, I feel like it makes doing deals very efficient and quick and really nice. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
I think that's another thing, like our business isn't 9 to 5 anymore. Like, you know, we're not stepping in an office, but our office never ends. Like there are always so many doors that we have to go through because we've got to make these connections and
Yeah.
we've got to close the deal and then work on the next deal. You're
Right.
always prospecting, you're always working, we're always looking at the next deal, we're always
Yeah.
doing the deal, we're always thinking about stuff. It keeps it exciting, but it's not easy.
All right, Sabrina, thank you so much for coming down today. I really appreciate your time, your knowledge. I learned so much in this conversation, and if anybody else wants to learn more, just stay tuned on the Prospect Group Instagram channel, and can't wait to do more deals together.
Likewise.
Yeah.